Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this special, um, special treat really to meet with firefighter leaders, both on this day that we use to really commemorate and thank the heroes who did so much for us during 9/11 and frankly do so much for us day in and day out. And so what we wanted to do this morning was have a conversation with all of you about two things, really about how we think about 9/11, what the implications are for these fine people who represent us every day, on the front lines of really helping people in need in our community, to spend a little time thinking about that, and then to jump into talking about wildfires and what can we as a community do to be better prepared, and then also with our emergency medical services as well. So I'm really, really excited to be here with Matt Tuttle, who's the San Jose Fire Union local president, local 230, and Bill Murphy, who's a local 1165 Santa Clara County firefighter and leader in our community as well. And so thank you so much, both of you, for being here. And since we're talking about 9/11, I thought maybe each one of you could just share a little bit about how you got into firefighting in the first place, and then maybe talk a little bit about what this day means to you and to other firefighters in our community.
Yeah, for me with 9/11, when it occurred, I wasn't yet in the fire service. I was just starting college. And that day will be a day I'll never forget in terms of waking up to go to my summertime job between high school and college and seeing what was on the news and what was occurring. And at the time, I'd always had an interest in going to the fire service and seeing the sacrifice that the 343 firefighters made that day was an honorable one. It was one that was inspirational, knowing that they all knew what they wanted to do, which was save as many people as they possibly could, but did it without hesitation. So on a day like today, with memory back 21 years, it's a time to reflect on that sacrifice, on what it means to be a firefighter, where you lay down your life for others, for those in the community. So it's always been something that's struck a chord with me. We talk now with the ever-changing firefighters that we do get into our service with. They may not have been born on that day or may not remember that day because we're getting younger and younger.
Mhm.
That it's a time too for them to hear the stories of what actually happened, and time to reflect too on the career that they've chosen.
So,
So I'm getting toward the tail end of my career here. So I fought my first structure fire about a week after I graduated from high school in 1992.
wow.
When I went away to college, and I was a volunteer firefighter at the time. And so, yeah, I'm getting toward the tail end of my career, but when I look back on 9/11, I was in, like everybody, I can tell you exactly where I was at the time. I was working in tech here in San Jose, and really that moment was kind of the moment that pushed me over in terms of if I was going to pursue firefighting as a career. That was the moment where I decided that that's what I was going to pursue. It was 3,000 people that died that day. The 343 firefighters. I can't say other than knowing that I was going to pursue the career at that moment. There are a lot of other emotions tied up in 9/11, I think, for myself and a lot of other people. But ultimately, I can look back and say that I wouldn't change a thing as far as my profession goes. I can't say that I've enjoyed every minute of it, but it's and certainly the last several years have been, I think, for myself and everybody else, especially in the California Fire Service, have been very challenging, to say the least. Yeah, no, it's been a great ride so far. And I would say, 9/11 was that moment where I decided that this is what I wanted to do.
Well, I want to say thank you to both of you for your service and your commitment to the community. And, one of the things that I'll just say is that I look at my role, both as a council member and on the Board of Supervisors, as one that it really requires us to do our very best to give you the resources that you need to help people in our community. And I've done ride-alongs with both of your agencies and learned a lot from them. I will tell you that for any of you who have been old San Jose and have been watching San Jose, we used to have a council member on the San Jose City Council by the name of John DeQuisto, who was a firefighter and before he became a council member. And one of the things that I remember him telling me was that early on in his firefighting career, that there was no training and no masks, and that that they would just, kind of willy-nilly, he didn't use that word, but it sounded willy-nilly to me. Sometimes, running into burning buildings without all the resources that you needed. And so one of the things I know he became very committed to was, as the fire service became more and more professionalized, really understanding the needs that men and women have on the front lines. And so the first fire I ever went to learn was with our former council member. He's since passed away. And one of the things I was most struck by was that he, like both of you, seemed to have the ability to take a situation that could feel chaotic, somehow manage it in a way that allowed you to go and do what you needed to do. And it was really a transformational thing. You get there and there was a lot of activity, a lot of running around, and then the fire service came and calmed everything down and started to give people tasks. And when you're watching it from the outside, I think especially if you see most of what you do on TV when you don't see it in real life, it can feel very different. But I will say to those of you watching that we have, really some of the finest men and women serving us, and especially to be able to go from both firefighting to then the medical services that you provide, and doing it in so many different ways. Your hazardous waste, incidents, to car accidents, to frankly to gunshots, to any number of things where you're asked to be on a location and then a fire, right? And so thank you both. And your teams have incredible skill. And I think particularly on 9/11, it's important that we just acknowledge both the choices that people make, that you all have made to serve others, and to do it when people in our community are at their worst. So thank you.
Yeah. No, thank
for
you.
doing that. All right. So one of the things that I wanted to be able to also just recognize is that now with climate change, we see fires are hotter than ever and faster than ever. And for many people in our community, I think that better understanding what we're doing to be prepared for wildfire is something I'd like to dive into. And I want to start, Bill, if you don't mind, with you, because I know that the county has really been looking at this for a while and taking actions relative to this. And then I want to come to the city, because what I know is that there's so much changing in our environment. And I think particularly as we look at climate change, that even the way fires behave, and I think this is a discussion I had with you many years ago, which is, I'm reading an article that says they're burning hotter, faster, creating their own weather. Is all of that true? And you said, yes, let's do something about it. So I'll turn it over to you to get started.
Yeah, first I'd like to thank you for at the county level championing moving the wildfire issue forward. I think that starting that discussion at the county level, understanding the complexity of the California Fire Service and how we respond to these really as a collective fire service. We all recognize there is no one agency that's big enough to solve this problem on its own. But when we look back, and I would go back to, for me, it was 2014. I went to a fire down in San Diego, and it was really, if you ask a lot of firefighters, we were seeing some fire behavior on the news, and we're like, wow, that's kind of, that's different. And it was a lot of fire whirls, and it was an very early summer fire. down in San Diego that we just was not, it was atypical, right? There was something about it that everybody's like, wow, that's a little bit different. And pretty much almost, I don't want to say nonstop, but pretty consistently since 2014, we've been seeing these fires that it's almost every single one of them. We look at them and go, wow, that's something new. That's something that we haven't seen before. Just last week or, within the last couple of days, the mosquito fire that's burning up in, I think it's El Dorado and Placer counties. I think it's technically in both counties. Again, reflecting the size of the fires. And the smoke column that the fire put up, approached 40,000 feet in elevation, right? And so, a combination of factors, whether we're talking about the fact that our summers are consistently getting hotter. We just aren't getting the rainfall that we need to revitalize our fuels. Historically, we kind of described the west side of the valley, the Santa Cruz Mountains, as the asbestos hills because the redwood forests are very resistant to burning historically. That's not the case anymore because the fuel moistures have become so low. And so, yeah, no, it's absolutely the last several years because of these factors have become a huge challenge for us. And I kind of always look at it as a system that we've built in California that was developed back in the 70s. That's when the mutual aid system was first developed, and it was for the fires and emergencies that were occurring at the time. The reality is our underlying dynamics have changed, and I think they've changed pretty substantially to the point where the system that we built to deal with the emergencies that we're seeing it needs help. It's not the same system that we're going to be able to solve the problem with moving forward.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah. We tend to kind of forget how close we are in this valley to a wildland threat. And I think the perfect example, which was just highlighted, is you take the SU complex fires from just about 2 years ago and the CZU complex in the Santa Cruz Mountains. We're talking about things that we've never really had to see or experience or prepare for, where with the SU complex in particular, we're evacuating major neighborhoods in the east foothills of San Jose. That the threat of wildfire was kind of always there. And I think the Oakland Hills fire kind of made it somewhat of a little bit of reality with how close things kind of occur to what we consider us as a valley, as a big city valley, which, who would think that skyscrapers are going to burn, or neighboring communities so close to a downtown central core area. So things like having to evacuate the villages, or even as far south as communities in Morgan Hill. The question shouldn't necessarily be, what do I do to prepare? It should be, what should I do to prepare? And it's not a question of if, but just when, because these fires are burning hotter. They're burning closer to our neighboring homes. Where, take Santa Rosa for instance. I'm not sure if you were on that fire. I wasn't there, but I know we both collectively sent a lot of resources up there. You're talking about a community that was probably never thought that they were going to experience the devastation that they saw. And the same could be said about any of the communities in our surrounding agencies, especially with Santa Clara County, and then us with South San Jose and East Foothills, that you're only a spark away from creating complete devastation in a single neighborhood. And to that extent, it's what services can we provide, and are we truly prepared in this area as a fire service to respond to that?
Right, and I think those are both really excellent points. And one point that I think is just really important that we share with all of you is that, our ability to be responsive is really going to be linked to our ability to work together. And, so I'm really interested in getting your thoughts on this. So there's a few things that we're going to be requesting actually at the board. And one is that
continue to look for new technologies that allow us to see fires sooner than we do today, right? That it won't require necessarily someone to see the fire and call 911, but that we have eyes on, especially on our foothills and in the wildlands all around the county. And one thing I know that folks who've lived here for a while appreciate is when you look out your window, you're looking at a beautiful set of hills that are very, very dry right now. And to remember that the county is, I think, 350 square miles. And what that means is that for a good, third of them, we are interfacing with open space. And so just as you think about it, and as I've been thinking about it as a policymaker, what it makes me think is that we need to make sure that you have all the equipment that you need to be able to fight these fires, and that we need to get way into investing in prevention. And some of those technologies that we're going to be asking about for the county will be to look at drone technologies and technologies that allow us to see further, faster, so that we can be able to detect wildfires. But then as you fight them, so there's two pieces to that, like what's the best strategies for detection? And then the second is, what do you need to be able to fight them? And what should the community be advocating for, in that area?
Yeah, I know you guys have implemented a new fire prevention program too with hand crews. We do work, both of our agencies concurrently with and cooperatively with CAL FIRE, the state resource for providing fire aid. But at the same time, we're only as good as what we're provided to with our budgets at a city or county level with providing those resources. I know in San Jose, we don't do as much mitigation as far as defensible space for homes around those areas as we probably could or should. But some of those things could be, tied back to the homeowner themselves with what they can personally do on their own personal property. But there's a lot of improvement that can come. So things like drone technology is great. It gives us a little bit of an idea of what we're getting into before we even arrive on scene with where's the fire going, what's the size of it, what's our expectations of its burning capacity, that we can kind of set things up before we even arrive on scene.
Yeah, no, I kind of look at it as it's like what can we do before the emergency starts? And then what resources do we have during the emergency to make it go away as fast as we can make it go away? So Matt touched a little bit, County Fire has invested significantly in prevention over the last couple of years. Just within the last year, through board support, we started the first fuels crew in the county at the local agency level. And that crew's already out doing, improving fire roads. One off of Highway 9, and it's called the Charcoal Fire Road up above the community of Saratoga. They already did some work at Vasona County Park, removing a lot of excess vegetation. So, from a fuels reduction point of view, that's kind of the before. And then, like Matt said, for the homeowners, ready, set, go. It's what are they doing to be prepared ahead of time? And that includes their own fuel reduction work on their properties. Making sure that they have their go bag, that they're ready to go, because as we've all mentioned, the amount of time under some of the weather conditions that we see that people have to react to the fires is dramatically compressed, right? And so they go in whether it's San Jose Fire, County Fire, there's a number of agencies that have ready, set, go information out there that people can get. And then during the emergency, it's how do we get the right amount of resources, the right kind of resources to the fires as quickly as we can. And that's really, what we're, one of the paradigm shifts is that, you touched on Santa Rosa. The Bay Area literally has hundreds of fire engines in it. One of the things that you've seen agencies do through support from Cal OES is pre-position resources more frequently ahead of these weather events, so that we're standing up additional fire engines before the fire actually starts, because we know we can save property if we can get more engines there when the fire starts. So those are some of the things, before and during the emergency. Because we just recognize that fundamental conditions have changed. And so the way, our game plan has to adapt along with it. One of the things we haven't touched on, but on the same, along the same lines with the climate changes, there was a report that came out within the last couple of weeks. It talks about how our winter weather is also going to shift. So not only are we seeing more extremes during the summer, but we have the potential to see more extremes during the winter. And so, we're both all what we call all risk, all hazard agencies. How do we then deal with, potential increases in flood events in the valley? And there again, it's something that, we're always partnering and we train together frequently from a technical rescue perspective on things like river and flood rescue.
Yeah, and I'll just add one point to that is that I think, one of the things I'd really like to see more of, and I know that there are some studies going on right now that we want to be happening much more quickly, is the ability for us to do more shared purchasing of equipment and more shared training. So as an example, one of the things that we'll be asking my colleagues at the Board of Supervisors to take a look at is the training for our staff to be able to use bulldozers, even though we don't own them, Cal Fire does, so that we're able to operate other people's equipment. And then the second thing I think that we're gonna have to think a lot more about is that, some of this equipment is gonna be experimental, it's gonna be expensive, and having our agencies share purchasing and share training on new technologies is gonna be really critical too. I know you all, the city is using some drone technology now. And, I as silly as it sounds, I know, people don't think about how you have to actually be trained on the equipment. Drones seem so easy. They're not, by the way. I've crashed one, not a drone, but a helicopter. One of my son's Christmas presents when he was little. I watched him and my husband just, we had to, fix that. But anyway, but really making sure that we have the training necessary, which gets us to staffing. And just to share this with the folks who are watching is that we recognize that one of the most important things that we have to do is make sure that we have the staffing that we need for both police and fire and our paramedics. Right now, it's a really challenging time to hire people, and we want to be able to hire the best and the brightest. These are such important jobs. And so I would be really interested in getting your thinking about what do you both think we need to do to really be able to attract more people to such a challenging job, and frankly, a job in a place that it's so expensive to live. And I'll talk a little bit about what I think we can do on the housing side, but I'm curious about, as you all are thinking about recruitment for your agencies.
Yeah.
You're thinking.
Well, I think the big thing to kind of take away from it is when you're preparing for emergencies and when you're preparing your staffing levels, even bringing it back to the wildland response stuff is, look at it as a perspective of a new parent. You bring your baby home, they start moving through all the different stages of first steps, crawling, things like that. And we do so much as new parents, as a father of three, just for perspective, that we purchase all these different things to keep our children from getting hurt. Bordering the brick fireplace, door handles, you name it, to keep them safe. And it's an investment, right? To keep your kids safe. And I think you could look at it the same thing as for the fire services. Yeah, we're there to provide a service and we're there to provide protection for the community, but there needs to be a level too of prioritizing what it is that we do for those major emergencies. We never predict that our kid is going to fall down and bonk their head on a brick fireplace, as I mentioned before, but you're preparing for that emergency. So when it comes to earthquakes, wildfires, our community members, when they're calling us on the worst days of their lives, we're set up to provide that service to answer that call for help. Not for, it really is the what if kind of scenario. what we do as a fire service to provide those resources. So prioritizing more staffing and things like that, when it comes to recruitment, I mean, we could this, I'm not sure this is going to go on for multiple hours, because I think that we've all got a lot of perspectives on what it comes to recruitment, but the bottom line is it's an incredible career. It's a rewarding career. You know, we're talking about, I think in just Santa Clara County alone, some of the best fire agencies you could be a part of with what it is that we do and what services that we provide. But I think the bottom line is, you know, we do need more people to jump into this career. And what is it that we're going to do, or what is it that city leaders are going to do to encourage that kind of commitment to this level of service?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question we are facing, again, looking back on my career, in unprecedented challenge right now from a recruitment standpoint and filling the positions that are available. And it's partially, you know, related to COVID, in the sense that a lot of the schools that we rely on to train potential candidates just didn't, you know, not enough people were signing up to take paramedic classes as an example. And so it's really, you know, it's kind of like a supply chain issue, if you will, and that, you know, takes a while for that system to kind of get built back up and start providing candidates back into the system. And so, you know, I know I'm speaking for Santa Clara County firefighters, but I hear it from every person that I talk to when I go to, you know, a big fire somewhere. Every agency is saying the same thing. We just can't get enough people. You know, it used to be that if we held the recruitment, you know, we'd get several hundred, even, you know, in the thousands, depending on the size of your agency, people applying. We're not seeing a fraction of those numbers today, which certainly COVID played a role in that. And then there's also a dynamic of, you know, we touched on cost of living in the Bay Area is obviously a huge issue. And we're not quite sure. It's like, you know, we're trying to put our thumb on the problem as far as like, there seems to be a dynamic of public service, in particular, the fire service. We're not sure if it's because people see all of the emergencies that we're dealing, you know, the big fires, the commitment that it takes to, you know, travel, be away from your family, having to just go back in and fill stations behind the people that are going all over the state to fight the fires. There's a lot of dynamics at play. But, you know, part of it we're thinking is also related to the fact that it's not as attractive because of the commitment that people are having to make to, you know, go cover stations, go fight fire somewhere and be away from their family so much.
Yeah. And it's a double-edged sword too, with just in particular with San Jose. When you were on council, we had over 200 firefighters that were on duty every single day. The budget cuts that we saw from around 2010 with the reduction of our resources too. I mean, we were at a place where we were running about 70,000 calls a year. Now, for specific to the city of San Jose, we're looking at this year surpassing the 100,000 calls for service alone. So we're talking 60, 70 calls on average more a day for all of our resources. But now we're only able to staff 190 firefighters every single day because of the reductions that happened during those cuts. We still haven't seen a truck company brought back into service. We still haven't had our hazmat fully staffed. We still haven't seen Station 33 built. But why it's a double-edged sword is we still have to fill those positions. We still have to get bodies in there, and we have to get the right bodies in there as well. The biggest thing that I think that that we could both agree on is the lack of paramedics that are out there. We provide an invaluable resource with sending a paramedic on every single one of our apparatus to every single medical call. And right now, our paramedics, they're working hours beyond what they ever thought was even capable of doing just to fill those ranks. So what is the plan moving forward? creative ideas can we kind of think of to still fulfill that service, which is invaluable. And it's super important. We could probably all share similar stories from what we've seen with having a paramedic on every single fire engine, the difference that you can make in saving somebody's life, getting there faster. It's of the utmost priority to continue to have that kind of service available. But right now it's kind of at the cost of, mental health and physical health, that folks are doing more hours than they ever dreamed of, that, it's starting to break the system big time.
And I know we want to use everybody's time really efficiently, but if I could touch on one thing, because I think it's, by our nature, when you get together with firefighters, we're talking about bad things that happen. So,
Great.
but especially when we're talking about, how do we find more people? I can look back on my career and this holds true throughout. The people that sign up to be firefighters, we, by our nature, are problem solvers.
Yeah.
We want to, so whether we're talking about recruitment, wildfires, the potential for bigger storms in the winter, we're here because we want to solve problems and we want to help and serve the community. So it's, we do get up and you ask us questions about things that are challenges, and there's no question that challenges have become more dynamic for us. But rest assured, we're committed to working with our communities to solve the problems that people are facing right now.
Well, I think that, my observation, my experience with you all is that you do whatever it takes with whatever you have. That's how I describe firefighters, right? Whatever it takes with whatever you have to save lives. And that's part of the reason I think, really, truly, you're so beloved in the community. So I think people recognize that. I think the question that you're raising, there are a couple of them that you've raised that I think are really important for us just to think about as a community. And one is on the recruitment side. I don't know how many people know that we have more paramedics actually responding to calls than lots of other places in the country. I've met other folks who have firefighters, they have EMTs, and they have some training. But that paramedic training, that advanced life, support training is really critical, I think, to why you're able to save so many more people than normal. And I mention that because I would just say to all of you is that for generations in this county, we've had such an emphasis on really telling young kids that if you want to do something in our community, you want to go into tech and you have a certain way we think about success in our community. And the fact of the matter is we have all of these roles here that for helpers, right? Whether it's being a firefighter, a police officer, a paramedic, that we just kind of ignore a park ranger. And, so I think one of the opportunities that we have not fully explored is how we get into middle schools and high schools to talk about public service, social work. There's just so many great jobs here. And while it's so expensive to live here, they pay a living wage. Like you could actually afford to raise your family. And so one of the things I'd like to see us do is collectively, not government by government, but really all of us working together to work with our schools to make sure that they know what the opportunities are for them. As a matter of fact, Chief Kemna was telling me about a school that he saw in Arizona that was a high school that was focused on firefighting and public safety. And what a great opportunity for someone who already knows what they want to do, or frankly, to learn that's not what you want to do. And sometimes, the earlier you learn that, the better, right? You were in tech and you made a change. And, I think that happens for a lot of people. And so I would really like to see us working with unions, working with the schools, working with our community colleges to get in deep and really start to share with people what the opportunities are. And then the other thing that I would really like to see us doing is that, I've seen San Jose and the county really reaching out to more women. And I think that's an opportunity as well. And I've met some of the women who are firefighters in both of your organizations. They're amazing. And, we don't have enough women. And I'll tell you kind of just a funny kind of anecdote to that is I was actually talking to a couple of folks that work for you and another woman who works for you, and they were talking about the academies they want to put together, these, or not want to, but are doing. And they're one-day academies, so women can come and figure out physically whether or not they're ready. Without the pressure of applying for the job, but really just getting an opportunity to see if they're physically capable of doing this job. And one of the things I heard the women saying is that they were surprised at how many women were capable. I mean, who had the experience themselves and were able to say, oh, I could totally do this. I could do this job. And that's why you're seeing more women apply. But I think there have to be much more, many more opportunities for people to have the experience that before they have to sign up for the full kit and caboodle, because I think it'll be more cost effective for us and more cost effective for them to figure that out.
Well, and I think you raise an interesting point. It's, the fire service has evolved, right? In the sense of what we do on a day-to-day basis has evolved from, 40, 50 years ago, when the fire department was just going to fires,
Yeah,
right? There was a certain element, and pardon the expression, but of brute force and awkwardness that our job does involve a lot of manual labor. But today, we need people with skill sets as paramedics. All of us are EMTs. When we're talking about the large fires and emergencies, from a river flood rescue perspective, we need strong swimmers. We use people that have, public speaking skills when we go to the big fires to explain what's happening to the public. So the skill set that's required, and we kind of joke a little bit, we're jack of all trades,
Yeah.
master of none. The skill set that's required to do the job is way different than it was, several decades ago. So it's evolved to this, again, all risk, all hazard. Well, to provide that level of service to the community requires all kinds of people, right, with different skill sets, different backgrounds, and being able to attract that. And that's what I think a lot of people just don't understand, right? So part of our recruitment challenge is we do a lot more than just fires, right?
Mhm.
And we've had this debate over the years, whether it should really be called the fire department, because we do so many different things.
Yeah, actually, that is a really, really excellent point. And one other point I'll just raise is, I think all risk it's such an apt way to describe what you do. I think that's a really, really excellent point. And the other thing I would just say is that the different technologies that you have to deal with, right? Because 100 years ago, maybe not 100, but prior to, for example, having electric vehicles, there was a certain way that you got into a car during a car wreck, and then you had the jaws of life, and then you had to make sure you weren't hitting something electrical, and so you are all, I think, just exceptionally bright and learning a lot of things at the same time. So for me, one of the things I want to tell people is you'll never have a day that's the same, and it's not going to be boring, right?
Yeah. Our training is ever evolving with the way that just the world evolves. With you touched on electric vehicles. We go through additional training with how to shut down that electric vehicle with before we start cutting into it with the jaws of life that you brought up, or how to even mitigate it in the event of it being on fire. And again, touched on, we're problem solvers. Any problem that comes our way that we don't like to just throw our hands up in the air and just go, I can't figure it out. We're not going to be able to handle this. We get super creative with what it is that we're going to do to mitigate that emergency.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to do a quick time check. How much? We have 15? Okay, great. So I want to make sure we get to a couple of other
Yeah.
questions that I know that we got before, but just to maybe touch on the recruitment relative to the to what you need. And I think it's really important too that we talk a little bit more just about being a paramedic and what kind of creative things can we do that I think you all have put a new position within your contract to allow for folks to come on and then continue to get trained. Is that right?
Well, so I don't know if we've actually implemented that yet. There has been discussion around whether we require paramedic training as a condition of hire, right? So historically, and this is true of, of most fire departments in the area, is we're hiring either for a firefighter or a firefighter paramedic. And there has been discussion around whether requiring that training up front, is limiting, and again, because we have a challenge finding those people right now, or would we be better off just hiring firefighters and then training
them.
people ourselves, sending them to paramedic school? And it's, there's no question it's worthy of discussion.
And it's same for us. We've been lobbying hard for that kind of an avenue because not everybody gets the opportunity or may have the financial means to go through paramedic school.
Mhm.
It does come at a cost. I think looking back at when I was going through the hiring process, even having a 4-year degree was, something that was very valuable, but not everybody has the means to go down that road of getting a 4-year degree. So same thing with, for county fire where, the requirements or the need is there for a paramedic, but not everybody may be able to access that.
Mhm.
And what can we do as a city, in particular to San Jose, with being able to provide that kind of training? So that you get hired, you're able to go through paramedic school and it's funded through the city and through budget processes that now we're fulfilling the need. I think the challenge that we're probably all seeing too is we're talking about a long-term goal, but that's a long-term goal that probably should have been addressed several years ago
Right, that's right.
and brought up. But the prioritization was just not there, I think, for the fire service, or for cities and counties to kind of really tackle. But now that we're in that position of just the desperate need for more paramedics, now we're starting to see the wheels kind of turn, but we need champions to kind of go out there and kind of fight for.
Yeah, and one thing I would just add is that I think we have an incredible opportunity, and that is that sometimes, when we're thinking about the long term, we think, oh, that'll take too long. And I think about that relative to a lot of issues that we're dealing with now. And I think, we would be all saying, we would be so ahead of the curve had we just done what we needed to do back then. But just to say, I think, looking at creative opportunities to bring people on and to do that training with a little more integration with on-the-job training, I think that's an opportunity again for us to work with our community colleges to really integrate that training in for the folks who are working for us, because I think that we don't have the luxury, honestly, to do it another way. And the other thing I would just say is that I think someone coming on the job, figuring out that they like it and want to stay with us, getting that paramedic training and then getting people to make long-term commitments to their careers with us is going to be critical. And so I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to both implement the idea that's happening at the county, but being able to do that in partnership with all of our agencies. Because the other thing I think we have to accept is that cost is always an issue. We need to, we have a finite amount of resources. So really making sure our agencies work well together is important. Just for those of you who are watching, one of the things that we're doing at the county right now with all of the fire agencies is that there's a study going on that will really look at where there are opportunities for us to overlap resources. And the study's about the study's called consolidation. I don't really think that will be the end result for all of it, but I think it will allow us to have a much more critical look at everything from staffing to equipment to dealing with these brand new realities that we're going to be dealing with globally, by the way, because of climate change, and really being able to get ourselves ready for the next iterations of what are to come. Because I think that one of the opportunities that we demonstrated good work together cross institution. It wasn't perfect. We had to really work it out as we were doing it, but that level of collaboration is, I think, what every new challenge that we're going to be dealing with is going to require of us. So it's a very different way of thinking. So I'm excited about the opportunities to bring people on, make sure they love what they're doing, make sure they get the training that they need, and then making sure that we have as many paramedics on our team as possible. So let's talk a little bit about now we have so many questions that we didn't get to do. maybe, maybe I'll just try to combine a couple of these. So as you think about the future of your work and the future of your service, if you were to take a look at the way we currently provide mutual aid, do you have any concerns about that? And I just want to say out loud what my worry is, and then to just get you all to think a little bit about this. And then I want to be able to give folks resources. So I want to give you a
Yeah.
chance to talk about this. I want to make sure that we get everybody to some websites that I think can be helpful as well. But on this front, one thing I worry about with so many more fires is having enough equipment stay in a region that we're not fearful about mutual aid. Because when I very first got on the council, and I know this was true when I worked at the county, actually, before I ran for city council, the call for mutual aid would come and we would say, you bet, like we're sending people not just to Santa Rosa, but to New Mexico, to Utah, to New York, right? When people needed help, we were able to do that. I now feel like people are way more worried about letting a resource go, whether it's people or engines, because of all of us are looking at the risks that we have around us. And so that's part of the reason I've been so curious about whether or not there are ways that we can jointly purchase equipment where the equipment can stay, even if our people power is gone somewhere else, so that we're not trying to move equipment. And I think that's what you touched on a little bit about being where we put engines, but I'm thinking about things like, like bulldozers or things that we use less frequently, but that are crazy, they're expensive and people need to be trained on them. Your thoughts?
And they're critical.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we need them, and with mutual aid, again, I think we're being less, we're being more cautious, and I understand exactly why. How do we address that and still protect our region?
yeah. I think the big thing is any incident or any fire that we go to, it's a puzzle. And it's a puzzle in the sense that you've got to put the right resources in play with it. So, for San Jose, we've got a variety of resources that we provide. Hazmat, which you had touched on earlier, urban search and rescue operations, wildland response. So as a countywide resource and things like that, when we have something that's out of service or that's not available, we're able to kind of do a little bit of a plug and play with relying on each other to put those resources together. I think when you've touched on going out of the area and out of the state, or out of the county, I'm sorry, to the state level, what resources are really truly left behind. And that's kind of, I think, what you touched on. One of the bigger issues is what can we do locally to fill those roles or fill those needs if all those resources have been dragged away and put on another incident? Can we still kind of protect what we have here? And that's our ultimate goal, even at the sacrifice of letting resources go. But our main goal and main focus is to provide resources for our internal cities, our jurisdictions. So when you do send out resources out of the county to the state level, it does put a strain on the resources that are available here. And I think that goes back to what kind of investment do cities and counties want to do to provide those resources and come up with a plan of how we utilize them.
Yeah, so I can answer your question very briefly from my perspective. Yes. Doesn't worry me. And Matt touched on all of the things that I would talk about. Hazmat, USAR, specialized wildland firefighting resources. We built a system, whether if we're talking about hazmat, we built a system. San Jose has a hazmat team, County Fire has a hazmat team. But frequently when it becomes a true hazmat emergency, we're calling each other because we need each other's help to actually mitigate it. And that's just on a day-to-day basis. When we start talking about wildland resources, the USAR resources, right? If we're talking about, extreme fires in the summer, extreme storms in the winter, we saw in San Jose, if there's a true flood event in the county, it's going to require everybody to come together. And that's not the way we built our system, right? We have a really solid foundation. We have a really good system in place. but it needs to adapt. And it's, we're seeing it already that agencies, if people need our help and they call, we're going to go, right? But that has an impact on our system here locally.
Mhm,
And more importantly, it's having an impact on our people.
mhm.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it. We're seeing it in the stress that it's, the last several years have put on, firefighters, our allied, even, our partners in EMS, our partners in law enforcement,
Mhm.
several years of flexing the system to its absolute capacity. We're going to show up when you call, but it's having an impact on people.
And we could, the other big thing that you brought up too is we can have all the people in the world, but if we don't have the equipment to staff it. So in the event of a massive earthquake, for instance, here, we get told oftentimes, well, everybody being close by and stuff like that, everybody's going to come and help out and whatnot. And it's true. We're going to have people that are going to come and show up and serve the community and do whatever it takes, but we don't have the equipment, we don't have the apparatus that are available. You're talking about a bunch of people that are driving around in pickup trucks in their own personal vehicles trying to mitigate the emergency.
Mhm.
We don't have the apparatus that's available.
Yeah, and I would just say that, in my experience being both at the county and the city, I do think that I think this is such a fixable thing, and it really is just going to require us to dig in and frankly, be as thoughtful as we can be about the people we're about to serve,
Yeah.
and less so about agency X and agency Y. And, and I'll just say to everybody just to think about this, because I think out of sight, out of mind, that when COVID hit, we were dealing with COVID, heat waves, power shutoffs, wildfire. And to your point, the system got really stretched. What I worry about is that we don't know what the new normal is going to be, and what that really requires us to think very critically about is what do those partnerships look like at an even deeper level. And one thing I'll just share with folks that are with us, and we're going to share some resources, is that LAFCO is doing this consolidation study, and we'll put all this on our website. So if you're interested in taking a look at it, and if you're interested in whether or not you live in a hot fire zone, you can go to the CAL FIRE website. We'll put that up too, because you can type in your address and it'll show you where you need to be, and it'll give you some great resources about what you can do to protect your home. But I wanted to let you talk about that.
Yeah. So one resource that we've made available, which and we're really trying to truly revitalize too for our community as well, is our life files. So you'll see the red packet that we have here, but it comes with an informational sheet, and we're going to make it available to Cindy Chavez's campaign headquarters too, for anybody that's interested. We've already been trying to roll this out for through our city council members and through the city, but in the event that you do have an emergency, it's got all the personal information that for the person at that residence, their medical history, medications they take, allergies, things like that. So if they're in a position where they can't necessarily express it or tell us what's kind of going on, we at least have a quick reference sheet that would be placed on your refrigerator where we've got access to all that information right then and there. It's super important thing. I think that, for my years of being a paramedic, we tend to not get all that information right away. So when we have that information available, it's huge for us to kind of try to pinpoint what exactly is going on and how can we help that individual that's calling for help.
Excellent. And so the other thing is I'm going to put up both of your websites and the county and the city's website, because if you're interested in firefighting or being what's the new name for firefighters? You
So
were just saying-
firefighters.
well, no, but you were just saying that you do so much more. So
Yeah.
I don't know what the right title, the right name would be.
Yeah.
If you're interested, or you have family members you think would be interested, we're very interested in having them. And hopefully we'll get a chance potentially to meet again and talk a little bit more about emergency medical services. But I appreciate all of you who joined us. Thank you so much for really honoring 9/11 with us today. And that in memory of all of those who lost their lives and who gave their lives for others. we will be praying and praying for them and their families today and thinking about them. And also to say to both of you how deeply I appreciate you spending time with me, but also for the service that you provide to people every day. It makes me feel really seriously confident about where we live, just knowing that we have you on our
Yeah.
side.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
We're proud to stand with you and we're proud of the support you give us.
All right, thanks all.